Okay, so hello everyone. You're all very welcome to tonight's webinar titled Taking Control of Grass Supply and Beef and Sheep Farms. My name is Joseph Dunphy and I'm delighted to be joined once again by my Grass 10 colleague John Douglas and Micheal O'Leary, the coordinator of PastureBase Ireland. I'm also delighted to be joined tonight by beef farmer Trevor Boland from County Sligo and sheep farmer Tomas O'Leary from County Kerry. And over the course of the next hour or so, we'll be discussing their plans for autumn grazing and how their management has a positive effect on grass availability in spring 2022. A small little bit of housekeeping once again before we get going tonight. All our webinars that we've done previously are recorded, and this one tonight will be recorded also. To get the webinars we've already done over the last year or so, if you Google Teagasc Grass 10, down the left-hand side of the page, we'll see the webinars subheading. And all the recordings will be there, and along with the PowerPoint presentations from each webinar on the night. So just I suppose to lead into tonight's webinar, autumn management or autumn grazing is really a two-step process on farms. We have a period of autumn grass build-up, which, to be fair, during September this year has been, very favourable. And Micheal will go through a few figures there in a minute from PastureBase Ireland. But the target to increase days at grass, the period of autumn grass build up, is to increase days at grass, is to get good on animal performance in the back end and reduce cost. However, we're now thinking of the final rotation, managing the final rotation. And that's, really to set up the farm to grow grass over the winter and to provide a bank of grass for spring 2022. When, I suppose we're hearing an awful lot in print media and on social media as well these days about, rising costs of fertilizer for 2022. Meal has been on the increase all year. So it's vitally important that we grow grass and we set the farm up to grow grass over the winter, so that when there's a large demand on a lot of farms in spring 2022, that there's a wedge of grass there to deal with that demand. So just to go through the structure here for tonight, Micheal O'Leary is going to give us a quick update from PastureBase Ireland, and then we're going to get straight into look at Tomas's closing plan. And I suppose he's a mid-season lamb flock, County Kerry, so it's important. He's a huge demand in the springtime. It's important the farm is closed off correctly over the back end of the year. Then we're going to move to Trevor after that, on his farm in County Sligo, on the beef side of the house, and then Micheal will give us a little bit of a quick look over at the new mapping function, some of the new tools on PastureBase. He's just going to give us a quick look at that for maybe 5 minutes coming towards the end. So Micheal, I'll throw it over to you if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Joseph, and good evening everyone, and thanks for taking the time to, I suppose, attend this webinar. So I suppose, look, what's in the slide there in front of, I suppose, is the national grass growth curve. And we can see the 2021 figures there in the broken green line. It has been quite a challenging year as regards grass. We seem to be going kind of into peaks and troughs, kind of wet weather into drought scenarios from time to time. And I suppose at the moment growth is quite good. We can see that, I suppose, at the moment it's over the last year and the 5-year average. And then maybe if we just move to the next slide there, Joe, we can see, I suppose, that May, I suppose, was a disappointing month when it comes from grass growth point of view. We actually grew more grass in September than we did in May. So May would usually be our main grass growing month. But look, it was that kind of a year. September kind of, I suppose, was a big advantage to all farmers, and it gave guys a chance, I suppose, to drive on as regards grazing into the back end. And I suppose that's why we're having this webinar here. There is quite a good bit of grass on farms at the moment, so we'll try to make the most from it. Then I suppose if we move on to put some figures on it, I suppose, look, we have an average farm cover there of about 920. Again, this data is coming from beef and sheep farmers who recorded in the last 7 days on PBI. A growth rate in there at 37 kilos stock to 2 livestock units per hectare, and a pre-grazing yield there of over 2,000 kilos of dry matter per hectare. Look, I suppose they're just averages. There's quite a big range. average farm cover from over 1400 down to under 500, and growth rates from 60 down to 20. So look, I suppose the main thing is that, I suppose, if you are farming, I suppose, look, these guys that we have on the call, and the guys that we're discussing on this slide here, the 66 farms, they've gone out, they've done their measuring, they know exactly what's going on. And we'd be encouraging all people on the call, I suppose, if they're not already on PBI, to sign up and to, I suppose, try to manage their grass that bit better. Then just I suppose, to talk about annual dry matter production. Again, for dry stock farms, we just had a quick look there before we came on there this evening to see how the dry stock farmers were performing, and roughly just less than 10 tonnes grown year to date. I think we're going to beat last year's grass growth, but it's only slightly, I'd say. So again, look, there's 7.5 tonne there coming from graze grass, and over 2 tonne coming from conserved silage. Roughly about 6 events being achieved on these farms as well. And again, these would have greater than 30 covers done year to date. So I suppose they're the top people. Then if we move on, then Joe, maybe to the next slide, just some new tools. I suppose PBI, I suppose, is evolving year on year. I suppose it's kind of driven by farmers, really. Whatever kind of tools that are suggestions that come up, I suppose we try to accommodate them as best as we can. We have a new nitrogen planner, which I suppose gives monthly guidelines as regards chemical nitrogen. Look, it's a tool that you would use maybe in January or February before you start spreading fertilizer, and I suppose put a plan in place. And then I suppose we can see, was that plan implemented, or I suppose you can see where you actually are as regards your target. A new nitrogen use efficiency, the NUE / nitrogen surplus calculator was also, I suppose, developed. Again, it's more of a new environmental parameter, I suppose, and it's all around the efficiency of nitrogen, which is brought in onto the farm, and I suppose what nitrogen is sold out the gate. And in this case, it's probably coming from meat, lamb and beef. Then I suppose the next tool then, I suppose, that we will talk about later is just a mapping tool. And then finally, I suppose there is weather data as well coming in from Met Éireann weather stations, our own Teagasc weather stations. And I suppose we can get a prediction as well for your own farm. So I suppose, look, there's a lot going on as regards PastureBase. Look, there's a lot of tools. Every farmer doesn't need to use every tool, I suppose. Look, get familiar with the application first. Try the grass measuring, and get familiar with the grass wedge and the different bits and pieces with it, and then maybe move on to the likes of your nitrogen planner and I suppose your nitrogen use efficiency tool as well. So I think that's me, Joe, is it for the moment?
Great stuff. Thanks a million for that, Micheal. And sure, look, we'll be chatting to you there in a while about the mapping function. So just before we get into the thick of things there tonight, I suppose it's just to hammer home, like, we know the advantages in terms of, from a grassland point of view, of animals at grass. From a cash point of view, obviously there's less costs, but from a greenhouse gas point of view too, every additional 10 days at grass reduces greenhouse gases by 1%. So and there's also the lower ammonia emissions at grass versus housing. So look, at just ought to have all those sort of figures in your arsenal when you're chatting to people. So going to throw over to John there now in a second, but just some of the factors that are influencing the spring grass supply. And really and truly, nearly everything on this screen is in the control of the farmer. So if we look at the closing dates and closing the farm off correctly and setting a target date to close off based on your demand on your farm. And look, at the people here on the call, there's a huge range in terms of stocking rates on beef farms and sheep farms around the country. The autumn closing date is pretty much is completely in the farmer's control. The closing cover, the cover of grass that's on that farm on the 1st of December every year is completely in the farmer's control. The winter grass growth rate, the more grass we leave on the farm, clean grass that was, closed off correctly in October, mid-October of the year. There's no huge butt or dead material in it. That winter grass growth is completely, it's 50% down to the farmer to have that clean growth there, and then the rest is down to the weather conditions we get over the winter time. And we also looked in at spring nitrogen application. So, getting the best bang for your buck when you go out with that is completely down to the farmer. Spring grazing management is down to the farmer as well. And spring grass growth, is really down to, your management during the spring, not allowing your farm cover to go through low throughout that spring period. And then we're reliant on, temperatures, sunshine, and all that to get up and drive grass production as we move through March and April, next springtime. So a lot of the things we're talking about tonight, it's all in your control as a farmer, or nearly all in your control as a farmer. So John, I might throw it over to you here now. That's all right. John, you're still on mute.
I'm talking to myself here in the room. No, thanks very much to Tomas and Trevor for joining us, and for anyone watching, and for people who are watching back. So hopefully you get a lot out of this and set yourself up for the springtime. And I suppose that is about having the right amount of grass on your farm that you need for your animals, and having that grass in the right place. So, there's no point having the paddocks beside the yard with no grass on them and all the grass on the far end of the farm. It's not going to really incentivize you to get out early and save and make more money. So we want to avoid that. So anyway, some of the objectives, and I suppose I'm going to start on the sheep side. I'm going to bring Tomas in a couple of minutes. I suppose we want to feed the ewes and maybe some lambs as well off grazed grass. We want to close up the farm properly, and we'll come to what we mean by that. We want to set up the pastures for early spring grass. So I suppose we'll use Tomas as an example, but when Tomas's sheep and ewes lamb down in early March, that there's grass available for them, that it minimises any other supplement that has to come into the system, because that at the moment is probably at least 3 to 4 times the cost of the grass. Okay, so we have the opportunity now to either do this job right and save next spring and make more money, or we can sort of ignore it, let whatever happens, and then end up feeding that meal or feeding whatever into the ewes to compensate for the lack of grass being there, which is going to be expensive. So the starting point, I suppose, is, well, really, I suppose back in August, but for now, in terms of the grass supply for next spring, the actions, the decisions we make, and the actions we take over the next few weeks are going to impact that greatly. So really, to have enough grass for spring, we're talking about closing on sheep farms. So we're talking about a mid-season flock from mid to late October. So if you're lambing in February time, you would want to start, back towards early October. So, you might as well, you don't have to worry if you haven't sort of closed up anything, because effectively you just don't graze 1 or 2 paddocks in maybe in November, December when you normally would. You leave them there. We'll try to graze out, and we'll see Tomas's couple of pictures, so I'm not going to go through that. It's better look at a visual. Again, what paddocks we close, we're going to use Tomas's as an example. And I suppose the big thing is, when we do close a paddock, so we go in and graze it, and we graze it out well, and then we close the gate on it, and we don't come back with any animals to graze that again until there's sheep coming back with lambs in the springtime. Okay, so at the moment, the autumn demand on the farm with sheep is about 1.2 to 1.5 kilos of dry matter per day. Okay, so if we just take, for simple maths, about 1.5 kilos of dry matter, that means 100 ewes is eating about 150 kilos of dry matter. So it's probably going to take them roughly a day. I suppose 100 ewes will probably take them maybe a day and a half to eat a bale of silage. That's roughly what it's working out at, right? So 100 ewes will eat a bale of silage in about a day and a half. So this is only about half the demand for the springtime. So when we move into the springtime, as soon as that ewe lambs, and as soon as she starts increasing their intake. So the lambs are gone. There's a lot more space to eat. So that turnout is 2.4 kilos. Just at the point of lambing, it's probably half of that because the lambs are taking up so much room. The ewe actually can't eat that much. So as soon as those lambs are gone, her intake's double. So you're up to 2.5 kilos straight away. So that's nearly it's 1.5 times, I suppose, what they're eating at this time. But then if we look at down the road a little bit, 3 or 4 weeks later, they're eating double what the ewe is eating now. So a ewe 3 to 4 weeks after lambing is eating twice as much as she's eating today. So therefore, demand obviously is twice as big. So if we have to run, if we're tight on grass, we're better off being tight at this time of the year. And if we have to feed a bit of extra silage earlier, that's what we do, because the result of not doing that is having to feed twice as much in the springtime, which is going to cost you twice as much. Okay. So yeah, that's just sort of summarizes that. So it's up to you to decide when you want to start closing off paddocks. So the earlier we start, the more grass available. So what might impact that, or to make you decide, is your stocking rate. So how many ewes per hectare. So in this in the sheep sort of planner, I suppose we're talking probably 10 to 12 ewes per hectare probably suits it. For farm stock lighter than that, it's probably not going to start closing as early. But as a good guide, you're better off following our plan that we have. And if it works for you, that's great. And if you felt that you had way too much, you don't, maybe leave it a week later next year, or if you didn't have enough, start a week earlier next year. It's that sort of thing. So it's a process of probably a couple of years to get it right. And that's across all enterprises really when it comes to grazing in the shoulders. Because every farm is different, there's so many variables, you really have to concentrate on your own farm. But start with the guidelines and work off them as a base. So the effective closing date on grass supply in early March. So we can see there paddocks close on the 20th of October. For when that paddock is closed and it's available in the springtime again in early March, it has about a week's grazing on it for 50 ewes. Okay, so that's per hectare. So about a week's grazing for 50 ewes. If we close that a month later, the 20th of November, we're only basically half that. Okay. And if we go again 20 December, we're slightly less again. We're slightly less than half of that. So there's a month there, and I suppose this is the thing, right? So you've grazed the paddock, we'll say, in the last week, and maybe you should leave it and not graze it again. If you go back in again in November or December, you can see there's only going to be half the amount of grass available. So this is at a time, there's not only, I suppose, there's half the amount of grass available. So that this is a time, I suppose, the ewes demand has increased, as we said. And to substitute that, if you basically have to fill that gap of 3 or 4 days there with something else, it's a very costly decision to have made. So be very careful. Okay. So really in the springtime, the average farm cover on sheep farms should be about 650, and that's based off, I suppose, the growth that's going to come over the next 40 to 50 days. That it should match up, that when you're starting into grazing paddocks again, so they're grazed out and grazing for the second time in later in April, that they have covers of sort of 12, 13, 1400 back on them. Okay, so that ties in with that. So what we're talking about there is probably an average on a sheep farm, an average farm cover there of about 6 centimeters across the board. So it might be a range in the springtime of paddocks. Some paddocks there will have maybe 9 centimeters, and some will have only 4 centimeters of grass. But with 4 centimeters is basically zero in terms of the residual. So you're in that range. That's what we want. So that's just setting the scene. So maybe Tomas, thanks very much for joining us. How's the weather down in Kerry today?
We had a good day now today. Yeah. Can't complain.
How are the ground conditions for this time of year compared to normal?
Yeah, they're very good. We had a share of rain now last week, but ground conditions are still very good. And
are you tight on grass at the minute?
No, it's a great back end, the best now that we've had. We've loads of grass.
Yeah, and that, I suppose, coming back to the good September that Micheal was talking about, or is there any other reason?
Well, it's the growth, obviously. The weather came good. I suppose it's the whole paddock system as well. You know, that you're resting fields. You know, it's a combination of everything really.
So some of those fields you're going into graze this week were probably hadn't been grazed in maybe 5 weeks or so.
Yeah. So, you know, you'd be up in 35 days, 40 days, like, you know.
Yeah, sure. If it was growing 60 a day during that period, that means your grazing covers of around 2,000 or probably
Yeah, there's
12 centimeters or so.
we've heifers as well on farm, and they're inside in those kind of covers at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So give us a rundown. What's happening on your farm? So just in terms of maybe sheep and sheep numbers and your stocking rate and stuff like that.
Yeah. So we'd have 270 ewes going to the ram. The ram went last Saturday. So they're a Belclare, Suffolk, Texel Cross. We'd be lambing on the 1st of March. And we'd be looking for a scanning of 2.1, 2.2.
Okay. And what are you weaning at then? What's the weaning rate if you're scanning at 2
This year now is just slightly over 1.7 across the board, including the O-lambs, which was quite a good year really.
Geez, including your lambs, that's a fantastic figure. Yeah. So that's and I suppose you're growing a lot of grass down there, Tomas. How come you're growing so much grass? Like, just to put it in perspective, like that 17 tons that was grown last year, that would be the equivalent to enough to feed 17 ewes per hectare, if you like, for the year. Because for one ewe on our lambs, it takes about a ton of dry matter to feed them for the year. So obviously that's probably where the heifers are coming in, Tomas. I presume that you're not stocked to 17 ewes a hectare anyway. But
yeah, like I think last year they were kind of working around 15 ewes. I've brought back now for this year because I just think it was just too high. So I think it's around 4.5 livestock units per hectare during the peak period there in the summer. So it's quite heavily stocked.
Yeah.
So it's tough going kind of late spring, summer. Everything has to go right. Measuring grass, I find is the best tool I have there. Like I'd be out every 4 days at late spring, summer. You'd be wondering like where is the grass, but by measuring it, you know exactly what's there and where it is, and it's a great tool to have. That I couldn't have those stocking rates only for that really.
So you're actually, I suppose, by measuring, that you can grow the grass to feed that many sheep on that stocking rate.
Yeah, well, I suppose you learn from experience. I've been doing this now for a few years at that stocking rate, so you learn from your mistakes, and
Yeah, very good. And you look achieving over 9 grazings per paddock as well last year, and probably on track to do the same or more this year already. There's a bit of silage, I suppose, cut off that area as well, so that's taken out any very strong paddocks during the summertime, I presume.
Yeah, like I have 2 blocks of land, a farm at home as well that's used just for silage. So that farm, the grazing block, is the farm that I have in Beaufort.
Yeah.
And so it's predominantly grazing, but there would be paddocks you'd have to take out, if they just got too strong. So you've top quality silage there as well. So it's a win-win situation, really.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a big difference there in the summer pre-grazing yield. So last year was 1,800, this year was 1,330, or sort of 7 to 8 centimeters, which is ideal for sheep and lambs and all to thrive. And I suppose that's probably, you were saying you have more lambs probably gone at this stage this year.
Yeah, so like I've only 46 lambs left now to go, I think.
Of about 500, so there's over 90% are gone already.
Yeah. So I think like it's the reason for that is I think it's the grazing height has a lot to do with it, and also I mix graze. So during the summer period, the sheep and lambs and the heifers are together, and that's the first year now I've done that, and I found that very good.
Okay, what were you finding good about it?
Well, you get great cleanouts. The time they're in the paddock, I have to split paddocks less because I have more stock inside in the paddock.
Yeah.
And they're in and out faster. So like 2.5, 3 days would be the max in any one paddock.
So they're always getting fresh grass.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose you can see there, just to point out, you'll probably end up doing close to nearly another 10 walks this year over last year. You said you were out twice a week there during the summertime.
Yeah.
And I'd say that probably has helped you get that pre-grazing yield right in the summertime, which has then helped the lambs thrive better. So, it'd be interesting to do maybe a correlation on the number of walks, the percentage of lambs drafted, on farms. Like I'd say there's a correlation there too, like, because you can see it on your farm this year anyway. And the fertilizer, then you've reduced it back in the last year as well, so you're back about 20 kilos a hectare as well. So you're cautious or conscious, I suppose, of the fertilizer going out. And
yeah, I'd be watching it every application really. I'd be going with a bag. Before I'd be going with a bag of can. Now I use protected urea, and like I'd be going with 20 units.
Yeah.
So like every application I'm going with less.
Yeah.
I'm not going out anymore, so any more often. And I've gotten the same results. A bit more clover put in as well. I think that's helping.
Very good. So in terms of autumn grazing management, and I suppose I ran through a bit of stuff there, Tomas. Like, what is the key thing for you in the springtime? Like, what are your targets for your farm to try and have enough grass for the spring? And
well, I'm lambing the 1st of March, so they're out. They get a couple of days inside, and they're out straight away. So my target is to have them out without any supplementation, and the heifers are out as well the middle of March. So I have to have enough grass on the farm to be able to feed all those stock at that stage.
yeah. And does even having the lambs gone away now free up, I suppose, more grass for the ewes, and I suppose does that hold them in a better body condition going into the winter time?
Yeah, like, so we body condition scored them there before they went to the ram, and they're well on target, above target, what they should be. So
Okay.
3.6 was the condition score on the ewes. So like it does, by having the lambs gone, 'tis a bonus, of course. You have more ground, for the ewes, and to give them better grass as well.
Yeah. But I suppose, like, when it comes to lambing time, letting them out to grass without any supplement, they need to be in the right condition, and I suppose you're getting that as well through the grass in the back end and the spring.
And it's important to have them in the right condition, obviously, going to the ram, but
Yeah.
equally when they're housed,
Yeah.
if they have condition, they'll fly through the winter.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have thin ewes, you're looking for trouble even before they start lambing.
Yes, yeah. So this 20%, I suppose, closed now, and that's what you're working on at the minute, I suppose, Tomas. 20% closed, or maybe even a bit more on your farm because you're higher stocked and maybe getting out a little bit earlier. So it's probably a minimum of 20, maybe even as high as 30% closed by the end of this month.
Yeah, like I'm starting now. They're inside in the first paddock now that'll be closed near the shed. They'll be gone out of that tomorrow evening, I'd say.
Yeah.
And that'll be closed. That's the first one closed.
Very
then
good.
Move into the next one then, and I'll move along that way. The ones near the shed, the sheltered fields.
Yes.
And, I keep to the target. They won't, even I'm doing this for a number of years now, but you would be tempted maybe when I started first to go back in and graze some of those, but tis a false economy to even to consider that.
Yeah.
Years ago when I got into sheep first, I didn't have sheds for them, and they were out till Christmas over the whole farm, and they'd be lambing then, and there'd be no grass, and you'd be feeding ration and meal, and I learned a lesson that's going back years ago now, 20 years, but I'd never go back to that again anyway.
You still remember it anyway, Tomas?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, very good. So generally, sort of every 2 to 3 weeks, then we're closing the farm another 20%. So we're working away. It's sort of, if you want, even 10% a week, roughly up until December. So we want to flick on there, Joe. Then.
Yeah,
So
just to come in there, John. I suppose. Look, if anyone has any questions for any of us or for Tomas or Trevor, that there's just a Q&A box down the middle of your screen, so you can just type in your question and we'll be taking them as they come in. Thanks.
Cheers, Micheal. So just this is just I suppose to reiterate your point there, Tomas. So the first paddocks closed in the autumn time is the first to graze in the spring, And these paddocks that we've marked, this is your block of land that the sheep and cattle mainly graze, so the main block. And these paddocks in purple here are the ones basically you're going to be closed by the end of this month, and maybe even another paddock along with it, depending, I suppose, how they're getting through it. But this really is the lifesaver when it comes into the springtime. That is the ground that carries the grass for the early lambing.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like if I didn't obviously close it, it wouldn't be there. And you know, as I say, I've experienced that.
Yeah.
So
and I suppose the factor near the shed, Tomas, you know, you'll probably see those paddocks with more grass on them than any of the rest of the farm. So that might be even more of a temptation to go back in. But obviously, do not regraze is the big slogan here.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's not even a temptation out of the stage. You know,
yeah.
not that you can look forward to having, you know, good grass there in the spring, and you know that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah, perfect. And that's just a map from PastureBase, so Micheal will go through a bit on that as well. So this is just your graze out. So this is probably a paddock what was grazed out, and maybe 2 or 3 days regrowth back on it, is it, Tomas?
That's right, yeah. So, you know, there'd be a good even graze out, and it's coming back again now, but that actually would have been a paddock that will be grazed again because it's further away from the yard.
Okay.
But, I just took that picture just to show the graze out, and you know, just to show what I'm doing, really, actually.
Yeah, perfect. So thanks very much for that, Tomas. I suppose is there any other things? I suppose just when we're talking about grassland management in the shoulders that you are, I suppose, implementing on your farm, or things that are important you think other sheep farmers might benefit from.
I suppose just on the slide that you had there, at 9, was it 80% by the 1st of December? I'd be slightly different, that I close everything. That I'd rather have something on the whole farm in the spring, because if you're putting out fertilizer, you need a certain amount of, you know, grass will grow grass. So I'd rather take the stock off in the start of December rather than leaving, you know, grazing some paddocks into mid-December or whatever. You know, I find it's you're better off. The more grass you can have for the spring, the better, really. So I think that's just one slight difference, I suppose, from what you showed there on the slide. Like, but
yeah, and again, like you have a higher. That's probably based for a farm, you know, maybe stocked at 10 euros a hectare. You're a good bit higher than that, so you need that extra 20% closed. So I suppose, sorry.
No, I suppose it's just the fact that I'm mixed grazing as well. That I've cattle. I just need to have maybe that extra bit of grass as well in the spring as well, you know.
And I suppose just to get the graze out, look, for anyone wondering, like, you know, if you're struggling, especially a lot of heavy covers this autumn, you know, strip wires with 3 or 4 strands is probably, it's a great way of getting yours to clean up. And especially now, if the ram has gone out in the last week or going out this week, you'll probably have smaller groups of sheep, so they're probably taking even longer, and it might be worth tighten them up and move them on quicker. It is a little bit more work, but it definitely gets the clean outs, and it'll definitely make them utilize more, which will keep them out for longer. So
and they get used to the wires. Even three strands of wire will hold yours, no problem.
Yeah.
You know, once they experience the wire, it's no problem. Like, you know,
and once they're being moved every 2 or 3 days as well, like it's different having a wire up and not moving them for 10 days or 2 weeks, you know. Then they're going to go through it, but you know, having the wire up and moving them quick, yeah,
it's not an issue, really.
All right, then, Joe.
Perfect. Let's click on a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, this is just coming back to, you know, if we're looking at, you know, for yos, I would say for 100 yos, if based on the height of the grass or the cover on the grass, how many days that's going to take them per hectare. So I suppose at the moment, if you're grazing some heavy covers, you know, 100 yos will probably take them 13 days to get through it. If you're grazing lighter covers, it's probably going to be more closer to a week. Like, so, I suppose it's just to probably get people thinking on what or how long it's going to take them to close up paddocks. So if they're going into paddocks in the next week, you know, you can sort of work out, which is actually good. It's going to take me a week to graze this or 10 days to graze this, so I should split this paddock, you know, and get a better graze out and close it up. So, yeah, but that'll be available after, more to look back on. We won't go through too much on it.
Perfect stuff. That's great. Sure, look, thanks a million there, Tomas. I'll call on Trevor there now, if that's all right. How's all in Dramard this evening?
We're all good down here.
Good
The
stuff.
weather's been good so far, but I think there's rain on the way. It's got a bit cooler.
Yeah. But it's probably the last week again has been ideal from a graze out point of view for up in the northwest at this time of year.
I would say so. Yeah. We've had a good. The last week has been good to the cattle. Like.
Yeah. Super stuff. Thanks a million. So look at Trevor. Sure, maybe you might just briefly. Your farm broken down into the different groups there now on the next slide. But sure, you might just give us a quick overview of your farm, just a breakdown of describe your system for me if that's all right.
Yeah. So suckler cows. I'm an autumn calving herd. Target start date for calving the cows is the 1st of August every year. AI will be starting on the 15th of October, which is tomorrow. And I also bring in some beef weanling heifers to bring to finish, Angus type, limousine type heifers that'll finish off grass in a low cost system that I'm not carrying them over the winter. 100% AI is used in the farm. Measuring grass, good for years now. The farm is fragmented. There's, I suppose you could say there's 4 blocks in it really, divided by a national road and a regional road. My targets are to turn out the heifers in as early as possible in the springtime, which is sort of about mid-March up this side of the country. Graze it till you're sort of trying to graze into mid-November. I suppose the main thing is to try to keep costs low as possible and get as much average daily gain on the heifers as possible over the summer. But that's both the beef heifers and the replacement breeding heifers. So I tried to calve a 2-year-old. Target weight for the heifers then at breeding is 420 kgs, and if they're putting on that sort of 1.1 kgs a day over the summer, you'll hit that target. As I say, then the target with the beef heifers is to keep the final finishing period as short as possible. I don't feed meal at grass, but I might bring them into the shed for maybe 3 to 4 weeks to give them a bit of meal to make sure you get the fat cover on them right. The bulls then, the bulls from the cows are sold live off the farm at sort of 10 to 12 months old. Again, it's a case of getting as much weight on them as possible with as little meal as possible. So it's grass throughout the summer there with them bulls. And the bulls, they're great animals for putting on weight on grass alone. Like you'll hit your 1.5 to 2 kgs a day, no problem with them bulls, as long as you're giving them good quality grass. So with an autumn calving herd, then it's important to have good quality silage in the herd. So any paddocks to go too strong are taken out for surplus bales. Target an early cut silage, and then throughout the summer and into the autumn, bales are taken out as the paddocks become fit.
Perfect stuff. So listen, Trevor, just a one or two things. I'm just going to go to the breakdown of the farm there in a second on the 2 maps. But look, just running through some of the data here from PastureBase. Look at the more than Tomas. There's a lot of grass being grown on this farm. 14 ton of dry matter per hectare. You're about 8.4, 8.5. Grazings per paddock per year. This is the data from your out farm where the heifers are running. So it's very impressive. Maybe take me through, Trevor. Why are you walking your farm 37 times every year?
I suppose for beef farmers, I was looking at stats there last night. We're not great at measuring grass, so by walking it just gets you thinking more. Even if you're not measuring, if you don't have a plate measure. Or you're not recording on PastureBase, just by getting out and walking the farm, it has you thinking about grass. I even find I'm going into a field now looking at the ground rather than looking at the animals, or looking around to see how much grass is in the next paddock, or how much, have I a week or 10 days ahead of me, how much grass I have. So by walking the farm, it forces you to, as I'm measuring it, forces you to record it, and it forces you to maybe take actions on it. And it keeps the mind focused right throughout the year. Even this time of year, I'm still trying to get out once a week measuring grass, and it just keeps the mind focused. And it sets you targets as well that you can try to improve on every year and grow as much grass as possible on the farm.
Trevor, would you have a set day a week that you do a measurement, or is it kind of maybe a little bit more kind of is it every 3 or 4 days, or 5? Are we once a week, or is it?
So it wouldn't be a set day, so it depends on the time of year. Okay, early in the year, you're looking at once every 2 weeks. Get a measure in January, in February, then you're moving up to every 2 weeks. Into March, then once a week, and then your high growth period, May, June, July. I'm trying to get out maybe every 5 days. So there's no set days, but I'm trying to get regular walks in and then if it's a very good week of grass growth, you get out after 4 days because you might need to take action on it. So it's more walks during the summer, and then this time of year it's once a week, and it's this time of year it's probably done on a Saturday or Sunday.
Great stuff. So Trevor, sure, just maybe you might talk about the specifics of the out farm here for a second, and maybe just go through it. So how far is this away from the home block?
So it's about 3 miles away from the home block. Generally, I suppose we're fairly fragmented up this side of the country. It's a 20-acre block. When you bring the heifers down to it, I bring them down in the springtime, as I say, they're in mid-March. You go down with it with the intention of not bringing them home again. And you don't have to bring them all down in the one go. You gradually increase it. So you have a cover of grass on it, put in the heifers into it. If the weather is bad, you move them every day. Don't leave them overnight in a paddock that they've done damage to. The paddocks will recover quickly, and you won't actually notice it after next grazing if you move them before a second night. So there's 11 paddocks down there. They're in a paddock for 2 days. If there's a lot of grass in the paddock, I'll actually divide up the paddock and try to get them raised out tight. The target is to take no surplus bales off it, so it's try to match the stocking rate to the grass growth throughout the summer. And then as we come into the autumn, so there's a mix of beef heifers and breeding heifers down there. As we come into the autumn, then the heifers start to come home, so you're reducing the stocking rate on that farm as grass growth rates start to drop. And really, it's that system down there. There's no meal being fed, and they go down, they're on grass, and you want them coming home as heavy as possible.
Okay, so from a simplicity point of view, as you said, it's 11 paddocks. You would set that way, and you've over the last few years you have the numbers of animals going down tweaked. And that that if those animals are going down, that system kind of nearly runs itself. That if you have 11 paddocks, you're moving them every 2 days. There's your 21 or your 22 day rotation. You're going into grass at the right cover at the right time, and you're getting the cheapest possible daily live weight gain.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm doing this a good few years now. I suppose previously, going back maybe 10 years, if I thought about the amount of cattle that I put on that 20 acres, I'd be thinking I was mad. I've probably twice the amount of cattle on it that I had that time. And there was surplus silage taken off this year, so I could go with a bit more stock on it and not necessarily take off that surplus bales. So they were really running there for the month of, I suppose, May, June. They were running on 8 paddocks.
Okay. And roughly how many did you say are going down there, Trevor?
So this year it's carrying sort of 40, we'll say 350 to 500 kg animals. Okay. But there is scope to increase that. This year is little understocked in terms of them animals that I had on the farm. I hadn't as many as I would normally have, and that's why the surplus grass was taken out. So it can carry up to 50.
Okay, perfect. Great stuff. And just the home farm here, Trevor. Just talk to me a bit about the system, how it's running here on the home block.
Okay, so you see the large paddock there, having that divided up into paddock, that would be probably mainly a silage field there at the very top of the picture. That then this time of year and in the springtime, I would run a reel down through that, or maybe divide it into 4. There's actually 4 gates in the 4 corners of that field, makes it easy to get stock out of. And then as you move up the farm, then as you go down the picture there, that's where the bulls graze for the summer months. So carrying the bulls there, and a lot of that, it was actually 2 cuts taken out of a lot of them paddocks at the bottom of that picture, because I wouldn't have had enough bulls to graze out during the summer. But that's where the bull weanlings stay for the summertime. And then across the main road, the far side of the main road, I run the cows dry. May, June, July, the cows are down there, they're dry. There's a yard down there that I can put them into. I tar them once a week. The yard is probably in the middle of the farm. They're nice and handy to get into. The cows get very used to coming in, and I actually think the cows like coming in to be tarred. So that just keeps the mastitis away. And I also use garlic lick buckets this year, and I thankfully no case of mastitis this year. But that's the general run of the home farm there. So that you have the lower part of the picture, and then towards the top out of the picture there is the national N59, and across that then the cows run.
Okay, perfect. So, like as you said, do you want to talk through some of your targets here? These are targets that you've kind of set over the last few years for yourself as the main things that you're going after every year on your farm.
Yeah, well, I suppose the 14 ton of dry matter they're growing in 2020. I really targeted 2020 to grow as much grass as possible. I was able to hit 14 tons, so I suppose the target now is to improve on that. I think it can be done. I have a bit more work to do around setup of paddocks around the farm. Like you won't go in and set up a farm in year one. It'll take a few years to get your paddock set up. Temporary polywire, run a few reels, see does it work for you, see where the water troughs are. You'll end up putting in more water troughs every year and dividing up your fields into more paddocks. So like there's parts of the farm that are growing over 14 ton. I suppose the target is to get the entire farm growing 14 ton. Just the 35 walks it's a target just to make sure I keep getting out and just making sure you go out with the plate measure, recording that data, putting it in and working on it every year. Like as a beef farm, we talk about dairy farmers. Every morning or every evening, a dairy farmer can see the milk in the tank, so he knows how his cows are performing. Beef farmers, we sell kgs of live weight. It's kgs of live weight that goes out the gate. We have to target to maximise the amount of kgs we're getting out the gate. So regular weighing is important there, and by weighing regularly, you'll see what your grass is doing for you in terms of them bulls there. I think there's some bulls in the picture there. Over the last few years, they'll do massive gain. You can get them doing that 2 kgs a day over a long period. It's cheap weight gain on the bulls. Then, as I say, the quality silage is okay. So when the cows go into the shed in possibly the first week in November, you don't want them cows losing condition because that's your breeding season. So you need to keep condition on the cows. I don't feed any meal to the cows at all, so it has to all come from silage, and that's important on the quality silage. And as regards to a simple low-cost system in short winter, that's just a matter of cost. There isn't a huge margin on the beef side of it, so we need to keep costs as low as possible. As a simple low-cost system, I'm trying to run.
And from a dry matter or from a DMD point of view on the silage, Trevor, what would you be targeting?
Well, I suppose we started off targeting 70 DMD or over 70, and we've actually moved to targeting sort of a 75 DMD silage. And it's just, again, it's taking a silage sample, sending away, and okay, you get your silage sample back. There's probably not a lot you can do at that stage on the quality that's in it. But it's next year that you target to improve it 1 or 2% there to get it up. Start trying to hit that 75 more regularly.
Yeah, no, that's super. That's super. And as you said already, you've covered a bit on the measurement already, like because as you said, it keeps you, it encourages you to think about the grass supply and the quality, and it helps you to keep on top of it, and the improved grass supply leads to improved animal performance. And as you said, when you're weighing more often, you can kind of see the good management, how it affects weight gain. So as we said, this is I suppose the some of the data from the out farm and PastureBase here. Trevor, is about 14 ton grown there last year, and as you said, look at it's very over on here on the right hand side. This is where Trevor, the times that Trevor has walked the farm last year. So as you said, he's walked it 37 times. So it is kind of starting, as we said, 1 or 2 in each month, but then as we get into the growing months, when grass is beginning to come out of control on farms, and where a lot of farmers tend to make mistakes just due to very high growth rates in April, May, and June, as you can see here, there's 5 and 6 being done, so that's, as you said, every 5 days per month. There's the farm is being walked, which is giving them great data there, and keeping the grass in check. So Trevor, just maybe take us through kind of from, like in the northwest of the country, normally it's nearly, sometimes it's nearly weather that puts us in as opposed to, grass availability. Maybe talk through from now on, both from the cow point of view, because we will have a lot of probably, suckler people on here tonight wondering, how you do it differently, maybe over the winter time, and then we'll move to the out farm as well then fairly lively after that.
Yeah, so at this stage now, all the cows are at home. Virtually all calves. Last few are left to calve, but majority, 90% of that are calved. So now at the moment, the target is just to keep grass, as much quality grass in front of them cows. The weather is helping at the moment, but it's a matter of keeping the cows out until the October bank holiday weekend. And I say the October bank holiday weekend, I'm working off farm, the time changes. So at that stage, I'll have 2 weeks, or I'll have maybe 15 or 16 days of AI done. I'll have almost all the cows got on their first cycle. Hopefully they'll all hold to their, well, okay, they won't all hold, but you'll have a good majority of them will hold to the first cycle. And then you'll pick the rest up over the next couple of weeks in the shed. I say I don't want to be coming home in the evenings, dark evenings, trying to go out and see is their cows in heat or what's the story with them. So as I say, it's to keep condition on the cows at this time of year. There's calves on them. The calves are 2 months old at this stage, and you don't want them cows losing condition. So you have to keep grass in front of them. The other issue then, your breeding heifers, your weanling heifers, you need to keep grass in front of them as well. You don't want a check in their performance, because, and I've seen it over the years, a check in their performance will actually stop them cycling, and you won't see them coming into heat at all. They'll have stopped cycling. So to get the cows in, then get them in good condition. They'll lose a bit of weight over the winter, but the target is not to lose too much weight over the winter. That you keep them on a fairly level energy plane. That they're still putting milk into the calf. The calves are getting out of the shed during the day, and as I say, the cows hold their condition over the winter with no meal. It's just silage.
So you said that just on the spring turnout there, you're kind of saying, Trevor, there the calves are moving away from the cows during the winter period, during the winter months. Yeah.
So in the shed, if the day is anyway good at all, the door is just open on the shed, and the calves are let out to graze. It's really the field, the paddocks around the shed, and you'll actually be surprised how far away the calves will go. They'll go a good distance away from the cows. And if you have a gate there, you can open up a gate, let them into the next paddock, and they'll stay away there for 2 or 3 hours in the day. And they pass absolutely no heat at all of coming back in. Come back then a couple of hours later, open the gate, calves will run back in themselves. So that means the calves they're grazing, they're picking away at grass there all during the winter. It breaks the bond a bit too between the cow and the calf. So when you do go to wean them I'd be generally weaning them maybe in April, May time. You're having that big stress on the calves. They're used to grazing grass, and they'll take along then, and you put the cows away then to put on a bit of condition on themselves over the rest of the summer months.
Okay, perfect. And just maybe take me through there. I have the opening cover from 2021 there. I won't say opening cover, Trevor, but it's end of February there. Like there's 1,098 of a cover there. So there's a lot of grass on that out farm in the spring, in the springtime. How do you manage the last rotation in order to have that grass? Because as you said, when you go down in mid-March, that farm needs to be able to support. There's not, you're as you said, you're not really going down with any meal. You're not going down with silage to it. It has to support it. There has to be a bank of grass built up.
Well, I suppose really from there's not much stock. The breeding heifers have come home off it. All that's left down there now is what will be next year's beef heifers. So it's been closed up really now as we speak. We'll get another couple of weeks down there, but at that stage then, mid-November, that farm is entirely closed up. There'll be a nice cover of grass on it, and my thinking on it is the heifers go down in the springtime. They won't be fully used to back grazing again. They're coming out of a shed, coming off silage. They'll start off grazing, but when the growth comes, they'll be ready to push on at that stage, because they'll have a couple of weeks grazing off that, we'll say the high cover that's down there. Get them to graze that off, divide up the paddocks, let them graze it out tight, and then that new grass will come back. When the new grass is back, then them cattle will be ready to push on and get that weight gain on them quickly.
Yeah, and I just put in that example there, Trevor, that you're going down mid-March, and it's probably something that sometimes farmers, when they turn out, that maybe they're turning out at Paddy's Day, and all of a sudden they're running around the farm. The farm has been ran too quick, and all of a sudden mid-April comes, and if we get any bit of cold weather at all, there's not enough grass back on those first couple of paddocks. But even from that example, if Trevor on his farm, if he has 11 paddocks, if he's to stick to 3 days, and even get a little bit more out of them, say if he gets another 4 days out of some of those paddocks, like that's a 33-day rotation down in that block. So it's just you can be fairly confident, Trevor, that you've probably more than likely 30 days of grass ahead of you when you go down there, if you're getting the 3 days out of those blocks. And hopefully by the time you get to the to mid-April, that grass growth is coming well, like back on those first paddocks.
That's it. Yeah.
So, and you just mentioned there, I won't dwell on, but soil sampling there, you put big focus now for the winter, Trevor, on terms of that.
Yeah, so I suppose the farmers come a long way. It took a good few years to get the peas in the ground up. K's are always pretty good. My pH, I've spread lime on it, so the pH around the farmer is good. But peas were very slow to build and very hard to build. And I think part of it is that I wouldn't been feeding a lot of meal, so there wasn't a lot of pea in the slurry that was going out. So I wasn't getting the peas from the slurry. But no, I'm built it up now, and it's about taking soil samples and trying to improve on that every year. There's a couple of schemes there now at the moment. The department is coming out with a scheme for soil sampling, and it's probably there again next year. So it's a good chance for farmers to get their farm done and sort of work on the results then, because fertilizer is getting more expensive. So we're going to have to be smarter about how we use it.
Super stuff. And look at Trevor just there on that screen in front is just really summarising what you've just said there in terms of picking, keeping grass ahead of the stock. There's just one other thing here just before we move on to Micheal, and this is just really a guide to picking your paddocks to graze. And if we're as Trevor said there, when animals are coming out of the shed in springtime, there's not as big a demand, and there's a transition period there from silage back onto grass. So if we look at some of the paddocks that's closed, there at the minute, paddocks closed from the first week of October, further from the yard, okay access and dry. We don't really want an awful lot of grass on them when we go back into them in the springtime. Okay, if we go back into them, say from 1st of March on St. Patrick's Day, there's some very heavy covers, and if the weather isn't right, they're not the ideal covers to be in straight away. So really and truly, if you're picking your paddocks, like we were talking there a few minutes ago with Tomas, if you're picking your paddocks, for more, and especially on the beef side of things too, if you're going out, you're looking to go into 800 covers, 900 covers, 1,000 covers early in the springtime. So if you're going out, towards the end of February or early March, we want fields that are dry, close to the yard, recently reseeded, quickest growing, because if we want to get them grazed off first, they're going to be the paddocks that are going to come back in the middle of April with our in the middle of April with the second rotation of grass on them. So it's just have a quick think about essentially manipulating the final round. Don't just go around in a circle on your final round. Try and manipulate the paddocks where you want a heavy cover on in the springtime, where you want a medium cover on in the springtime, and essentially where you want maybe nothing on in the springtime, maybe something, especially on lower stock farms, that you probably want areas, with not a huge lot of grass on, maybe older swards, silage swards, awkward paddocks ready for slurry in the springtime. They're the sort of paddocks there to target to graze late, that you can get out early with slurry on them. So it's just something there to try and manipulate your last rotation. Micheal, I might throw it over to you just on the mapping tool there before we get finished. Thanks a million, Trevor.
Perfect. Yeah. 2 seconds there now, and I'll just set up the screen.
There. You go for it.
Can you see the PastureBase screen there now in front of you, Joe?
Yeah, it's coming up there now. Yeah.
Perfect. So look, I'm aware. Look, we're gone over time a small bit, so I suppose we'll we'll quickly just, I just have two things, I suppose, and Joe and John, I suppose, have touched on them already. Just quickly, the autumn rotation planner. You'll find it down the left-hand side here. It's also available on the app, the PBI app. And we just created one here for this particular farm here. This farm here, I suppose, it's a heavy enough soil. You can just click on add new planner here. Heavy enough soil, 32 hectares available for grazing. Usually starts the final rotation around the end of September 2021. Would like to get probably 70% grazed in a couple of weeks time or 10 days time really. And then I suppose housing generally is sometime in and around the first week in November. So I suppose they're just the details that we put in. When do you start? Sorry, we just did another one there. And 2021, that should be all okay. And yeah, so I suppose, wait a second there now. Term date has been in the future. Oh yeah, sorry, I might have gone wrong here. That should be the 25th of October, sorry, and the percentage goes in here. So yeah, so I suppose, look, it's a heavy farm starting to close off in September and fully housed in the start of November. I suppose the key with the autumn rotation planner is, I suppose, it gives you a target to be grazed, an area to be grazed each week, and it breaks up your farm into different segments. So if we just scroll down here quickly, it'll give you the table. The first week of the plan, last week of September, there's a target there to graze, I suppose, 5 hectares or over 5 hectares for that particular week. And then we have the second week of the plan and the third week of the plan. So I suppose we're currently in the third week of the plan, and we're aiming to have roughly about 16 hectares grazed. At the moment, we're sitting at about 14 hectares. So you can see the target is about 49%, and we're sitting on 42%. So this particular farm is slightly off target when we come to the autumn rotation planner. So look, I suppose.
So I suppose, Micheal, if your paddock size there was roughly, we say, a hectare, you're talking about 5 to 6 paddocks closing, 5 paddocks closing a week.
Yeah,
exactly. There are a hectare and a half paddocks, which is getting close to 4 acres. You're talking about maybe 3 of those, 3 to 4 of them closed per week.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, if you continue to record graze dates, I suppose, as the paddocks are grazed, your autumn rotation planner details, they will update. You keep the planner live, I suppose. You don't have to wait until you put in the new cover. So that's just another point there as well. But again, I suppose come back to Joe's the last slide Joe showed. I suppose you need to put a plan in place as regards what paddocks you want to graze and what sequence you want to graze them. And I suppose in the autumn rotation planner, I suppose it just gives you an idea where you are as regards your target here in the middle of the screen versus what you're actually grazing. So that's the autumn rotation planner. If you scroll up top there's a help button, and I suppose, look, there's a document there, and I suppose there's a video on how to interpret it and how to add it in. Then I suppose, look, a new tool that we did put into PastureBase about 2 or 3 months ago is the farm mapping. And in fairness to the two guys, Tomas and Trevor, they have their farm mapped already on the system. And I suppose, look, this farm here is also mapped. Look, we're using Google Maps. That's the layout of the farm there. And I suppose up the top left-hand corner here, you have different options. So if I wanted to display the grass options here, so we can see the covers on each paddock, maybe if you just zoom into this part of the farm here. So you can see the dark green here are the heavier covers, and the lighter green here is the lower covers. So paddock 1 here has 250 kilos of dry matter per hectare, and the paddocks here over to the right, 2 and 3, have 1,750. Then I suppose the paddocks which are coming up in brown, I suppose that there are livestock in this paddock here, paddock 2, when we did the last cover. Then I suppose you can quickly then change different parameters. Then I suppose annual tonnage results for each paddock. The days last grazed, for example, paddock 10 here is grazed 34 days ago. You have the number of grazings per paddock. So paddock 9 here was grazed 7 times. Then you've also the number of cuts of silage. So I suppose paddock 8 here was cut once. Paddock 1 wasn't cut at all. This paddock over here on the far side was cut as well. And then look, you can just move on through fertilizer, days last application, and then I suppose you have the amount of nitrogen that went out in the paddocks, the amount of pK and sulfur, and I suppose the final one here you can see what was the fertilizer type. So we have 18-6-12 with pig slurry, and they're the last 2, I suppose, products that were put out on the farm. Then I suppose soil fertility then would be the final thing, and I suppose the 2 guys alluded to the importance of fixing soil fertility, and I suppose the path that they have, I suppose, have been on, I suppose, and improving it and trying to grow more grass. Again, I suppose the dark green colours are showing the optimum, and the lighter green are showing, I suppose, your 2s and 3s. But I suppose you can see here as well, if we just turn off the pH, you can see here our index 4 paddocks or index 3 paddocks, and the blue ones here are index 2. And similar again with the K. So again, I suppose it's, instead of looking at data on the table, I suppose, look, it's a visual image of your farm. You'll know exactly where the paddocks are, and I suppose what needs to change. Then just as regards of mapping a paddock, if you just click on edit here, and we'll just quickly add a paddock here to the system. So you can simply just click on the pencil here that enables you to draw, and then you just simply, I suppose, click into the corners of the paddock. We've picked a fine square paddock here, so it's pretty easy to do. So that's the paddock drawn out. And I suppose if we click on this little hand here as well, we can also pull the shape of the paddock if we wanted to. So we can actually stretch it up here if the paddock was that bit bigger if you wanted to. And we just push these out. So I suppose it is quite a durable mapping tool, I suppose. So we have the paddock map there, and you just simply click on it, and you can select the paddock here from the list, or else if you're a new user of PastureBase, you can just click on add new here, and you can put in the code and the name of the particular paddock, and then that will be saved on PBI. So I suppose, look, anyone that has started using PastureBase or hopes to use it in the future, I suppose the mapping tool will definitely, I suppose, number 1, find out the correct area of each paddock, and I suppose number 2, then you're able to display results on the map here. So look, it'll probably be very useful into the future. So I think, Joe, I leave it at that, and bring yourself in again.
Super stuff. Thanks a million for that, Micheal. Look, it's for farmers, Micheal, who have who have already mapped their farm, or who have a farm map done previously using an app, or with got a company out to map it. It will add to that, but it can for people who don't have a map and maybe aren't fully sure, or are going to try and divide down larger blocks into a paddock system for 2022. It's using PastureBase for that is a huge it's going to be a huge plus going into next year.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the first thing for anyone that's thinking about grass measuring, I suppose, is to find out what area is in each paddock. And as you say, if you wanted to divide a paddock in half, for example, or where is half of the paddock, I suppose if you zoom in as much as you can, and I suppose pull up the paddock, and you'll be able to, I suppose, split it in half, or pull the shape around in order to get to half it. But yeah, look, we'd encourage all users to map their farm and get the most out of the application.
Great stuff. Thanks a million, Micheal. So look, just a final minute or two here, just to make everyone aware. for the Grassland Farmer of the Year competition has been launched again for this year and is closing next week. So look, at the Grassland Farmer of the Year competition recognises farmers who are achieving high levels of grass utilisation in a sustainable manner. And look at for more information and to get the application form for the 2021 Grassland Farmer of the Year, go on to the Teagasc Grass 10 website, and or if you're on social media, it'll be available there either, and you'll get further information on it. Okay, so look at just to summarise on what we've a couple of bits we've talked about there earlier on. Look at the grazing season, both from Trevor and Tomas. The grazing season 2022 starts now in autumn 2021. So what you're going to do over the next couple of weeks, leaving grass on certain paddocks or picking your paddocks where you want to be, is going to be very, very important. From the sheep side of things, pick 20% of the farm to graze and close in the next 2 weeks for lambing. So if it's 20 paddocks, choose 4 of the nearest, driest shelter paddocks to graze, and do not regraze these paddocks under any circumstances. Whether you have beef, sheep, contract rearing, dairy, whatever system is going, PastureBase is a tool of choice. And look at Tomas and Trevor have been have shown how over a number of years getting into grass measuring, and it's not going to be perfect the first year or two, but getting into a paddock grazing system and then building up your knowledge, building up your experience with grass measuring, getting better at it, and over a few years it can really add. And look at, if you're getting a paddock system set up for 2021, get set up on PastureBase Ireland this winter. Get in, start talking with the help desk and get yourself set up. Get your farm mapped and get ready for grass measurement in spring 2022. So lastly, just before we finish, I'd like to thank Micheal from PastureBase and John from Grass 10 for coming on here tonight. And I suppose the 2 stars of the show, Tomas and Trevor, it's both former winners of the Grassland Farmer of the Year, both from the beef and sheep side of the house. Super operators in their own right, and I'd like to thank them for the time, giving the time up over the last 2 days preparing for this and for coming on with us tonight. Lastly, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the Grass 10 program, which is FBD, Grass and Agro, AIB, Farmers Journal, the Department of Agriculture. Thanks a million to everyone for joining in tonight, and safe farming. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tomas. Thanks, Trevor.
Yeah, thanks, lads. Great job. Thanks.
Right, all. Thanks.